You've purchased an audiobook that has already sparked debate. Why talk about being anti-racist, asked some liberal, often white people, when they learned of the topic? Instead of talking about what we don't want, racism, we should be talking about what we do want, a just, equitable world where everyone can thrive. And some of my activist friends, often those who identify as part of the global majority, also protested. How can you talk about beloved community and shared human needs in the face of outright racism and inequity, they asked. They worried the focus on reaching for our shared humanity was just another way of saying, I don't see race, we're all human. This line of race-blind thinking, another form of racism, harmfully sidelines the specific needs, concerns, and experiences of global majority people. As I listened to these concerns, I gained more clarity about why I needed to create this audiobook. At one point or another in my own journey, I agreed fully with each of these positions. Indeed, I still do to some extent. I'm a Black Caribbean immigrant. I'm aware, now, that my experience as an immigrant reflects just one slice of the many ways that the belief in white supremacy has impacted Black people across the diaspora. My understanding of race has necessarily been impacted by my identity. Yet even as I come from a country where Black people were also enslaved and seen as second-class citizens for so long, our experience was different than the experience of Black people in the United States. In my country, for example, the first prime minister after independence from Britain was a Black man, 47 years before the United States had a Black head of state. One can infer from that simple fact the vastly different opportunities and sense of possibility Black people in most countries across the diaspora might experience, compared with those in the United States. When I came to the United States, I had that sense of hope, of endless possibility. After all, my parents chose to emigrate here because of the belief that the educational and vocational opportunities that would be available to their children would be limitless. I can't imagine many Black Americans at the time, let alone today, held that view. 7 years old when I arrived in the United States, I began to engage with the complexities of race in the United States and how I fit in as a Black immigrant only after many years. As a child living in Harlem, New York, I attended some schools where Black people were 95% of the student population, and others where Black people were about 5%. Throughout my entire educational career, I told myself, I don't know how to fit in. I'm too Caribbean for the U.S.-born Black students at my elementary school, and too Black and too Caribbean for the white and Asian students at my middle and high schools. I always assumed there was something I should be doing differently to fit in. Each time I experienced discrimination, exclusion, and outright racism, I felt that it must have been my own fault. Since I couldn't see how cultural racism was impacting me, I couldn't free myself from the responsibility I felt to fully embody the American dream. It was the land of opportunity, wasn't it? With advancement limited only by my effort and persistence. I, like all the immigrants I met, trusted that narrative, not seeing how it was steeped in the values of white supremacy culture. I worried that my failures would be seen as further proof of the inferiority of Black people. You can imagine my surprise, my outrage, my despair, when I finally began to have a glimmer of this larger force, a belief in white supremacy and how it shapes all our lives. The emergence of white supremacy as a cultural belief system was driven by capitalistic motivations to elevate whiteness in order to justify the exploitation and enslavement of the lands and people in the Americas. Indigenous First Nation peoples and people of African descent forcibly brought from their land, and of indigenous people and their lands worldwide. What could I do with that new knowledge? As an outsider in both communities, the Black Harlem community of my childhood and the white and Asian communities of my adolescence, it was not easy for me to summarily reject one group or the other, as I saw others do. I had found small pockets of friends, all of whom held different identities from me, as I moved through the various communities of my childhood.